Now, if Leah's having all of these children, and it's taken a few years, of course, if she's got 4 sons, I wonder how Rachel is feeling about all this. I mean, of course, Jacob's heart is really for Rachel. He loves Rachel, but yet her sister's having all kinds of babies. She hasn't had any. She's barren. Like Rebecca, like Sarah. And I wonder how she's feeling. Look at chapter 30, verse 1. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, "Jacob, give me children, or I will die." Well, what's Jacob going to respond? How's he going to respond? Remember, his dad, Isaac, and his mom, Rebecca, they couldn't have kids. And do you remember how Isaac responded? Isaac called out to the Lord in prayer. And now Jacob's wife, Rachel, is coming to him and saying, "Jacob, you give me children or I'm going to die." Because she envies her sister. Wonder how Jacob's going to respond. Look at verse 2 of chapter 30. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, "Am I in the place of God who's withheld from you the fruit of your womb?" I mean, is it my problem? Am I going to be able to do anything about this? And he's angry with her. And I think there's some big contrast there, really, with him and Isaac. But Jacob, this is his response. And so what does Rachel do then? Maybe she would turn to the Lord in prayer about this. But that's not what she does. Verse 3. This will sound like a great idea, I'm sure. Then she said to Jacob, "Well, here's my servant, Bilhah. Go in to her, so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her." Really? I mean, this is like grandma and grandpa. This is like Abraham, Sarai, and Hagar, right? And Rachel is thinking the same thing. And what does Jacob do? Rachel gives her servant, Bilhah, as a wife, and Jacob takes her. Jacob goes in, and you know what happens? Her servant, Bilhah, conceives. It works, right? It works just about as well as it did when this happened with Hagar, back with Abraham and Sarah. And so Rachel feels like, oh, there we are. Now I'm in the running for offspring. And so then Rachel's servant Bilhah conceives again, and now she's got 2. And the offspring battle is just about to begin. But this is going to be a little bit different of an offspring battle. It's going to be the battle between Rachel and Leah about who can have the most kids through Jacob. And so now Rachel's got 2 through the servant. Leah's got 4, and Leah's kind of not able to have any more kids right now. And so what happens? She sees Rachel's plan, and Leah thinks that's a good plan. She's got a servant too. So she takes Jacob, say, "You go take her. Have children through her." And so now Jacob's having kids with her as well. And then you even get stories like in the middle of chapter 30, one of Leah's sons, her oldest son Reuben, is out in the field. He finds some things called mandrakes, which might be something like magical fertility drugs or something like this back in the day. And Rachel, who's not being able to have any kids, hears that Reuben's found some mandrakes. So she comes to her sister Leah. She's like, "Give me your son's mandrakes." And Leah's like, "I don't want to give them to you." She said, "No, give them to me. I'll let you have Jacob tonight if you'll give me the mandrakes." And so Leah gives the mandrakes to Rachel, gets to stay with Jacob that night. And who ends up having children? Not the one with the magical fertility drugs, but Leah. God opens her womb, gives her a 5th child, and then a 6th child, a 6th son, and then gives her a daughter as well, named Dinah. Rachel still has no children. And part of what we're seeing is God is completely sovereign, in control over the giving of offspring. And it's through difficulty that the offspring are even born. But then verse 22 of chapter 30, God graciously remembered Rachel, and God listened to her. And she did pray throughout some of this time at least, and God opened her womb too. And she conceived and bore a son. And God said, and she said, "God has taken away my reproach." And so she calls his name Joseph, her very first son. Well, the story goes on between Jacob and Laban, because remember, he's still living down there, outside of the land that he's been promised. And Laban and Jacob, they kind of have an interesting relationship as father-in-law, son-in-law. It seems that Laban's always trying to deceive Jacob and is always trying to get the best out of Jacob, or take the best, I suppose we could say. But no matter what Laban schemes or tries to do, God is determined to bless Jacob. So Jacob always wins. Laban's getting kind of upset about this. Eventually Jacob is like, it's time to get my huge family out of here. So he decides to kind of steal away in the night or whatever, or undercover, and they try to go on the run. He's got a big family, all kinds of animals, and he runs, and it's like the third day before Laban finally figures out that Jacob has left with his daughters, his grandchildren, all of this stuff that belonged to Jacob. And so Laban starts chasing after Jacob. And we don't really know for sure what's going on in Laban's heart, like what he thinks he might do when he overtakes Jacob, because he's going to catch him. But God then comes to Laban and says, listen, Laban, you don't say anything good or bad to Jacob. Basically, don't lay a hand on him. Don't do anything to Jacob. Laban eventually overtakes Jacob in chapter 31. And Laban is like, what are you doing? You leave with my girls. You leave with my grandkids. You don't even say goodbye. Why'd you do it? Now, you know that I could have caught up with you and I could have done all kinds of stuff. God told me not to, so I'm not going to do it. But don't you realize that, Jacob? Why did you do this to me? And then Laban asks a very interesting question. This is in Genesis chapter 31, where he asks another question in verse 30. It says, now you've gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. He says, I understand that you want to go home, Jacob. But why did you steal my gods? Why did you steal my idols? That's Laban's question. I understand that you want to go home, but why did you take my idols? Jacob has no idea about that. He answers first, look, I thought you might hurt us if we tried to leave. I just wanted to get away. But about the gods thing, I didn't take any of your gods, your idols. I don't want them. I wouldn't have taken them. I didn't take them. In fact, if look around. If you find somebody here among my group that has your idols, we can kill them, because I didn't take them. So Laban goes around, tries to find them, and then the storyteller tells us who it was that took the idols. And who do you suppose it was? Genesis 31, verse 34. Now Rachel had taken the household gods. The one beautiful on the outside might not be so beautiful on the inside. She took the idols of her past with her when they left, and now she's hiding them in a saddle. And then she sits on the saddle and basically says, Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm in my period and I can't move. And so her dad searches everywhere else and never finds them. Jacob's like, see, we didn't have them. And Laban goes home. Pretty interesting. What we're starting to learn about Leah, Rachel, Jacob. But in any event, Jacob and his whole family are headed home. Back to the land that God promised Abraham, the land that God promised Isaac, and the land that God has promised Jacob. But it's been a long time, been at least 14 years since he's been back to the land. And there's at least one person there that Jacob knows is going to be waiting for him. There's a brother that he doesn't know how he's going to feel about this, right? When he left, Esau was filled with anger and hatred. And now that Jacob's coming home with all of these sons, with all of these women, with all of these sheep, with all of this blessing, if Esau envied him and hated him before, I think Jacob's wondering, I wonder what Esau's going to do when he sees me coming home.